Hello, Atlantia. I'm Duchess Adelhait Fuchs, and this is Meet, Virtual Atlantia, where we ask tough questions and not so tough ones. I have the privilege of sitting with their Majesties of Atlantia tonight, Anton, Tremayne, and Her Majesty, Luned of Snowdon. Thank you so much, Your Majesties. I really appreciate you joining us. I hope your evening is going well.
Thank you for having us, and hello, Atlantia.
Well, if you don't mind, I'm just going to go right in and get these questions going and see just how much we can find out about you for those who don't really know you right now. Okay, so here's the first question. This one's a tough one, but I feel like it's really going to let Atlantia know where your heart and your truth really lies. So, Lancasters or Yorks?
Lancaster.
Certainly.
Lancasters. Ooh, well then. Okay, I'll just let that sit there and people can think about that, what that means exactly. All right.
Don't ask if you don't want to know, Your Grace.
I do want to know why, but I'm going to wait because I feel like waiting and finding out is much better because now I have a lot of questions to ask. Okay, so Your Majesties, this is probably one of my favorite questions that I really like to ask monarchs because I think we all try to emulate someone else from history as we sit on the throne. Who is your favorite historical ruler and why did you choose them?
So I would choose Charlemagne. King of the Franks. He had a huge cultural and scientific uplift during his reign. He was brutal. I mean, that's to be expected of the time period. But I think there was a lot of growth. It was a unique time in history. Obviously, there was a lot of tension between them and I've lost it. Who am I thinking of? I've lost it. Anyway, but he's a pretty righteous dude, and he's got the Song of Roland based in that, so that makes it even better.
First Holy Roman Emperor, right? You couldn't get better than being that.
He had an in with the Pope. It's very true.
What about you, Your Majesty, Anton?
So for me, my persona is 1250 Spain, so my king has to be Alfonso the Wise. In his time period, he unified most of the country. He successfully took on Portugal and won quite a few wars there, and did a big step forward to driving the Moors back to their land. Additionally, he published books on chess, books on astronomy, and the modern law that we take for granted today, a lot of it is based on his work. And his influence is even felt today. There's 23 people in the U.S. House of Representatives that have their portraits hung who aren't from this country. He's one of them because of the foundation work he did with law that has still until today. So I think he's done a lot of things, and he did fail at the end in his pursuit for chasing after the Holy Roman Empire crown, but you gotta dream big. Yeah,
sometimes you got to shoot for the stars. Obviously, he did not have as large of a success that Charlemagne had, but I feel like Charlemagne had a lot of children to help Charlemagne along also.
That's right.
He certainly had a lot of wives to help him go along. How about that?
Indeed.
Oh, well, that's awesome. I actually didn't know that about him. That's interesting. I'd really encourage Atlantia to read more about Spanish monarchs, especially prior to the Tudors, because a lot of people sort of overlook them, but they really were in power for many centuries, in fact. So I'd like to read about him. So on that same topic, sort of your historical leader, what period inspired film is your favorite to watch? What's your go-to? I can always sit down and watch that film.
I think we're going to have the same one.
It's going to be Kingdom of Heaven.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. So tell me, what's your favorite scene or your favorite quote from Kingdom of Heaven?
Well, mine would of course be, does making a man a knight make him a better fighter? And the answer is yes.
Hard to beat that one, but what is Jerusalem? Everything and nothing? Yes.
That's
Sometimes what we fight for doesn't make a lot of sense, but we fight.
I've watched it many times.
That is actually a really good spin. I like that, Your Majesty. That fits really well into the SCA and its culture. You know, you have your crown. Some people might find it silly why we fight, but it's still important. This one I really like because, you know, we all start somewhere, right? And there's going to be a whole bunch of newcomers probably sitting here watching this, trying to get to know you guys as we talk. So, Your Majesty, Luned, what was your first piece of garb and what did it look like?
Okay, so my very first piece of garb, I had like just this white under tunic that I think I got patterned from like Buttricks or something. That I made a white dress, and I had, amazingly enough, it was purple. Huh, shocking. It was a sideless surcoat, but it was one of the ones that was a square at the bottom rather than one of the real extreme gates of hells or rounded. So it was a fairly modest little purple sideless surcoat. Yeah, that was my very first piece of real garb.
And Your Majesty, Anton?
I have lived a blessed life in the SCA when it comes to garb. I was adopted by Master Eldred and Mistress Claire from the very beginning. My first event was a 12th night in Charlotte, which Claire made me garb for, that I still have and still wear. It was a long tunic with some applique work around the neck, which back in those days, nobody had done that type of thing very often. It was quite elegant. We rode down in a VW microbus, and I was in a wheelchair at that time, so I spent the whole event, 12th night, being rolled around by who I didn't know at the time was the king. That was Olaf. He just kind of took pity on this guy who had nice clothes and never really knew him before, so he thought he'd take me around and introduce me because he assumed I was from out of kingdom. So absolutely magical time. I was, just loved it.
Awesome. Well, I think I know your seamstress, and I can say that some of us are very blessed in that particular way. So we're always trying to recapture, I think, a moment that happened in the SCA. It's different for everybody. And my question to you now is, what is that magic moment for each of you that kept you in the SCA and kept you coming back to the SCA?
You're on.
I was hooked from the beginning. I was hooked the first time I saw fighting. I liked Canton meetings. I just liked every bit of it, and I liked the people, because we had fun with each other. Back then, it was lived in Chapel Hill, and we'd go to Kellenberg meetings. We'd all go out and eat afterwards. We socialized, and it became a mainstay in my life very quickly. So I was hooked from the social side of it way early, and always have been.
Very good.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if there's one defining moment. Growing up, I was a huge history fan and buff. And so when I was moderately in college, I wanted to join the SCA, but the meeting nights conflicted with another meeting that I had in college. And so I never could attend. So it wasn't until I actually graduated that I could actually become part of that and see what it was about. But since I liked medieval history, I thought I would love it. So I started to go to Canton meetings, and just really fell into it. I liked the social aspect. I liked the arts and sciences aspect. And amazingly enough, I liked to watch the fighting aspect. I even tried heavy fighting when I first started. Shockingly enough, I have no talent at that. I am short, slow, and perhaps I have a hasty temper at times. Combination.
I don't know anything about that. I really hope that at some point you both get to help build a magic moment for our newcomers and others that are, right now as we're stuck here inside. I hope that those moments get to happen again very soon. Your Majesty, Anton, I know that you like fighting. I guess that goes without saying here, but what other activities if you couldn't fight anymore today, what would be where you would go? What would you do?
Well, I think we all have ideas who fight because we've all been injured at different times, wondering, okay, am I going to go back and do it again? And we always do. But for me, my next love would be glass blowing. I would definitely do that. I would make the investment to be able to do it at society events and things of that nature. But I derive as much fun from fighting as I do from camping, camp hosting, building a camp with a look that makes us feel like we're on crusade. We're going somewhere. And I love it when the efforts in camps have the pennants, the banners, all the heraldry. I like the communion of us all sitting and eating together after we work to cook together. These are the things that I just absolutely adore about it. And if I couldn't fight, I would probably cook because I love that aspect of camp.
Awesome. And what about you, Your Majesty, Luned?
Wow. So amazingly enough, I was actually apprenticed to a laurel for dance. And that's Master Robion, who is now in the mid-realm. And so I would, if I weren't busy doing all these things that we're doing now, I would really enjoy getting back into dance. But I also like, I just like helping. I like autocrating. I like trolling. I like doing minister of the lists. I don't like to be bored. So I like hanging out. That's fun. But I also like helping and doing things. Arts and sciences, I do like the dancing. I used to sew, but that was so many years ago. I don't know that I'd get back into that. But definitely dancing. I like dancing. It's very difficult though when your partner does not like to dance.
Love it. Absolutely love it.
It's a little difficult.
Well, on the note of sewing, Your Majesty, Luned, what is the last thing that you sewed that you can remember?
Wow. I think it was His Majesty's vigil tunic.
Well, I won't put a number on that. So
I can tell you this, Your Grace. Last year at Penzic was my 30th anniversary as a knight. So that piece of garb goes back that far.
Your Majesty, you are welcome to put timelines on whatever you want to put timelines on.
There's some things you just can't hide.
Well, so Her Majesty does not tie this at all, but I hear that you are a fan of Bardic, Your Majesty Luned, and if you could tell us what your favorite Bardic song is, so I can then tell everyone to please not sing it to her every time you see her.
All right, so I said earlier, I like lots of songs. Probably my favorite is Roland. Love that song. My second choice is His Majesty's favorite, so I'm not going to say it.
You can say it.
Can I say it? Would be March of Cambric, which is also a great martial song. So I love both of those. I love to hear them.
So does those songs, when you hear them, is there a memory that it sparks from maybe right before a big field battle or maybe a night at a campment when everyone was sitting around having a drink and enjoying war stories from the day? Or
yes, I think for Roland, yeah, I remember the first time I heard that we were sitting around a campfire and it just blew me away. I was like, this is just an incredible song. And of course, Mistress Roz wrote that. And it was just amazing. And I loved it. And I love the fact that it tied in to the song of Roland from, Roland and Charlemagne. And so it was just amazing. And for the March of Canberra, I remember actually for the first time that I heard it was at Pennsic.
Marching to the field.
No, Count Kai
Yeah.
Was singing it, and I'd never heard it before. And I was flabbergasted. It was just such a great marching song to get your blood up and your feet going, and you wanted to take down a lot of enemies. So it really stirred the blood.
I don't think I've ever actually heard it, so thanks for letting us know about that. Maybe we can get a bard to sing it. Hopefully Pennsic or the next war. So this one is, we're going to start getting into our tougher questions, I think. I asked several people what they want to know from you about the society in your position as king and queen, in prior positions when you weren't as monarchs, anything that you've done before. And I really, really liked this question because I think when you start off in the society as a newcomer, you get a lot of advice. And then as you progress through the society, whether you've been in for 30 years and you've sat the throne 25 times of those 30 years, or you are a Pelican, Knight, Laurel, MOD, whatever, you're all those things, you get other pieces of advice. So this is sort of a twofold question. What is the best and worst piece of advice about the SCA you have ever gotten when you were a newcomer and then when you became monarchs?
Wow.
That's easy for me.
Well, you go first. Hold on, I'm thinking.
So as a newcomer, I went to 3 fighter practices, got my knee blown out at an SCA party, not even an event, and rode in a wheelchair for a year. So as I was coming out of that, Tom Justice gave me what has to be the worst advice that I've ever received. Now, Tom is, I love him. There's just no doubt about it. I said, okay, Eldred, tell me, what do I have to do to be a knight? He said, it's simple, Anton. You got to win 3 tournaments, embarrass the knights because you're not one, and they'll make you one. I said, that's it? He said, that's it. Probably the worst advice I ever really got for how you were going to do something in the end.
How did that work out? How long did you follow that piece of advice?
I held on to that for a really long time. Start looking for really small tournaments to go to, because the magic number's 3. It didn't say how big they had to be, but it didn't quite work out that way. And the best piece of advice came before mine and Leonard's first reign. And it really came from Duke Girth. And he said something that just has made it all make sense to me every single time. He says, a reign is a crucible. What goes in weak comes out crushed. What goes in strong comes back stronger. We've always come out stronger because we've always been a strong couple. We've supported each other, believed each other, and because of that, we've been able to ride the highs and the lows. And that was really Girth's message to us is, if you're not ready for this as a couple, it's going to try you, it's going to tax you, and it's going to be hard. But if you're ready, you're together, you've talked about it, whether, and he gave the example, if you go in with a weak car, you're going to come out with a crushed car. If you go in with weak finances, you're going to come out with weak finances. And likewise, if you're in a position strong, you've thought about it and you're ready on the modern side of things, as well as the relationship side, you're going to come out of this just fine, because it's an awful lot of fun to do it. And it's so rewarding to meet and see people that you really only meet this way as king and queen. Yeah, I gave you time to think of an answer.
Yeah. So I'll start with the worst advice as a newcomer that I got. And it was before I went to my first Pennsic. I was still pretty new. I'd been in maybe a year, a little over a year. And I was asking, what did people wear at Pennsic? What do people wear? What do you wear at Pennsic? I mean, is it just garb? What's going on? And I had one of the people in Kallenberg was like, you can wear anything. People wear elf ears. They wear chainmail bikinis. Really, you're okay, with anything you want to wear. And I was like, so for a while there, I actually contemplated maybe I could just wear modern clothes. People are going to wear that. Luckily, I checked with other people. And I was told, no, don't wear elf ears or chainmail bikinis, and do wear, tea tunics, which is what I had at the time, tea tunics and dresses. So I got okay with that. And the best advice I got when I was a newcomer was from who our senator was at the time in Kara, from Kara. And she said, meetings aren't the SCA. If you want to know the SCA, you have to travel. You have to go to events. That's where the SCA really is. Meetings are business, and sometimes we have, arts and sciences at them, but you really want to go to events. And that was great advice. It remains great advice. The heart of the SCA is traveling to events. As Monarch, I don't remember getting bad advice. And if I got any, I probably ignored it, truth to tell. So it flowed over me like a wave. So I don't remember it. But the best advice I got was actually by example, and that was from Duke Olaf. We were Prince and Princess for, was it 20 year?
Yes.
20th year down in Texas, down in Astoria. And they asked Atlantia, do you want to do court? Court was in a big rodeo arena. And we were there as Prince and Princess, and Olaf was king. And he said, I only have one piece of business. I have one piece of business. And they were like, okay. So his piece of business was an award of arms. And at the time he said, and I still believe it, this is the most important award in Atlantia. In the SCA.
In our greatest court, we give our greatest award. And Robert Durath got his AOA.
His AOA.
That's now Count Robert Durath.
Yeah.
He's done okay too.
So that was the best advice. I think that to remember that is the most important award. Raising people to the nobility.
Yep.
That's a great story about Duke Olaf. Thanks for sharing that. There's probably a lot of people who don't know who Duke Olaf is. So, new generations have come, and he's sort of, while he's a legend, and a lot of us do know who he is, I think that he might not be as well known anymore. So if you could sum up who Duke Olaf is in just a few sentences, what would that be?
So Duke Olaf is my grand knight. I was squire to Sir Forgall. Forgall was squire to Ole. Ole was squire to Duke Michael. And Ole was and is the most independent of squires I think Michael probably ever had. I'm sure that was a challenge for the both of them. But Ole fought Golden Gloves in the Navy. He was the person who, to my mind, made two-sword a world-class legitimate weapons form. Ole didn't block blows. When you threw at Ole, he stabbed the blow with the end of his sword. And his eye-hand coordination was just remarkable. But it's all the things that he did on the field are nothing compared to his personality and his heart and the way that he was a friend to everyone. Ole never met a stranger. He had a gift and has the gift to just talk. I'd recommend that you do one of these sessions with him. I think that he would love it, and I think it would be a great piece of Atlantean history.
If you've ever seen the movie Knight Riders, Ole would fit right in.
Yeah. Suddenly, Prime is going to have an uptick in that particular movie, and everyone's going to be confused as to why they're suddenly watching that old film.
We own it at our house.
Well, thank you. That's good to know.
Film for the earlier discussion.
That's right.
Well, so this goes more into your time as king and queen, but you are both very successful in your mundane life. So what is it that you bring from your mundane careers, family, your history that makes you a successful crown?
Well, modern by training and education, I'm a lawyer. So I've done a lot of public speaking. I've done a lot of argument and logic and those sorts of things. So I think I bring that kind of thinking to the throne. And I run, I help run meetings in businesses. Right now, I don't practice law, but I do contracts. I specialize in that. So, and I work for a large corporation. So, and it's global. So we run meetings and are in meetings potentially all during the night with China, with Europe. And I'm very used to dealing with groups and interacting with different segments of those groups and trying to get people to work together as teams. So I have done a lot of team building that I bring that I think is very important as a monarch.
For me, I've worked internationally and globally all of my life and traveled a tremendous amount. And I really have loved it. I love meeting people from wherever they are. I basically like people. Sometimes it doesn't look that way, but I really do.
I have a similar problem.
But I know, but just learning how to bring people together from different cultures and different starting points and win. That's what I hope we can continue to do. I've had great students through the SCA, and every one of them is different. And what I have tried to do with each one of them is similar, but there is no one formula. So you have to kind of tailor to each person how they hear the message the best. And I think you get that from working with teams all over the world, working with individuals and groups. So maybe that's it. I don't know.
No,
hard to tell.
I think that's an excellent answer. I think that was just a good way for people to kind of see where your leadership skills come from. That question was actually asked by an individual who wanted to know more about what they thought of you, as they thought you were very strong leaders, and they were curious where that actually came from. So that was why that question got asked. Okay. So I think it's a great question too. Now this, we've already established that Her Majesty does not age, so I'm not going to, again, ask anything on a timeline here. But the last time you reigned may have had some time in between to the current reign. What has changed culturally that's most notable to you in the SCA from then to now?
Culturally? There are different things that I think the SCA is cyclical. It tends to be. And so some of the cultural things cycle through. And supposedly in the SCA, a generation is what, 2 years? 3 years is a generation in the SCA. So I've been out for quite a few generations. Until we came back anyway. There's been a long gap in that. Culturally, I see a lot more reliance, obviously, on technology. That didn't exist back then, or certainly if it barely existed in its fledgling youth, we didn't utilize it as much as we do now. And there are some things, some traditions, and I'm trying to remember which ones they are now. We've talked about it in the past, and now, of course, I'm having a blind moment here where I can't think of anything. But we used to have traditions. Oh, I know. So one of the traditions is that it was always common at feasts. First of all, everybody went to feast. There was below the salt feast, and then there was regular feast. And so that was very much popular. You didn't have a lot of people leaving. So culturally back then, most people stayed for feast. That was a big deal. And there was always the toasting. The monarchs were toasted, the heirs were toasted, the baron and baroness were toasted by the senior peers, ranking in order of precedence, right? So the senior one would do the king. And I was a little shocked when we came back that had kind of stopped. It was very sporadic anyway. I think it depended on where you were at. What else culturally? Worthy ceremonies. So we had worthy ceremonies the last time we reigned, but they weren't nearly as popular for peerages as they are now. Now they seem to be like the de facto default ceremony, and it wasn't that way back then. There was a pretty big intermix of regalia ceremonies and worthy ceremonies. Sometimes there were vigils, sometimes there weren't. I think there were hardly any writs.
Yeah, you didn't have a writ tradition.
There was no writs. You didn't give writs for peerages. And rose parties. That was something I'd never heard of. So when someone becomes a duchess, they get a rose party. That was brand new. We didn't have that way back in the dinosaur age.
So I think the biggest thing for me was events used to be more important because we didn't have Facebook. We didn't have the internet in the same way. We had the Mary Rose. That was a fledgling thing back then. That was very controversial. Should we be talking about stuff on there or not? Okay, we're way past that today. But events is where everything happened. There was not this ability to communicate the results of events, the awards. I mean, in many ways, this is really, really fantastic for a kingdom that's grown the way Atlantia has. We have multiple events on every weekend when we're allowed to have events. And the ability to find out what went on, that was really almost medieval in its sense that it took someone traveling back that had been there to come back to the local group and tell. And that was a big part of local business meetings was what happened at this event. And there'd be a report and people would tell and they would try to remember who got what. And that's really different. We don't live in an area now that has a local group, so I don't know if that happens the way that it used to, but I'm betting that it doesn't because it doesn't need to. People already know the information.
Everyone waited with bated breath for the acorn to come in the mail.
Yes.
Everybody waited for the acorn and tournaments illuminated.
Yes.
So that was excitement. You got your acorn in the mail, you could read it and see what events were coming out, what things had happened.
It was slower.
Much slower.
No, yeah, I get that. I think that makes a lot of sense that it was a different time. How do you think we can incorporate that sort of, I mean, obviously we can't go back. We're already full steam ahead into the future of instant gratification communications, that kind of experience. So how do we continue to keep that social environment from events alive when it is so instant gratification? How do we keep that magic piece there since there's no time in between any longer?
So I think there's two things. And I've given this a lot of thought because this is near and dear to our heart. And it was some things that we were going to stress during the reign with events and will, depending on when we get back into the business. One, if you're going to have an event, go to the trouble to really do it the best you can. Think about how the hall will be decorated. Think about how the list field is decorated. It's better to have one less event to do the two that you do really well. So I think striving for excellence for the experience of the event by the hosting group and everyone coming there is your guest. That mentality, I think, is really, really important. So for me, I would look for, are we doing the best job we can do? Is this our best effort? That's the question I would ask as an autocrat to my team, to the hosting group. And then what can we do for it? And what can we do to make it work that way? And I think that's just hugely important. One of the things that we had committed to do and are committed to do is that we're going to have a short 15, 20-minute peerage meeting with the 4 peerages at every single event. From the ones that are polling peerages. And the idea was not to have pollings on there, not to talk about things that go on traditional in the meetings where everybody's published where they're going to be and that sort of thing, but to talk about who did we see at this event. Not necessarily, oh, this person needs a pelican, but hey, pelicans, who did you see? Hey, this person over here, this is their 3rd event. Look at what they're doing. We need to help them get some direction. They're doing a really great job. They just need some focus. Laurels, did you see this first attempt from this person over here? Not for us to drive it, but for the community to have the excuse to come together and just talk about what happened at that event. Nothing more. But that's one thing we were going to do and plan to do, to drive that communication. I'd like to be able to do it at Kingdom for the Kingdom orders and those type of things, but we're just not going to have time to do that at every single event. You know yourself from 2 reigns is time is the resource you have the least of at an event. So you kind of have to pick what you're going to do. But we committed at an event to do this for Masters of the Fence, the Chivalry, Laurel, and Pelican. It seems like we can't stop the Ladies of the Rose from talking to us, so there's no reason to think that wouldn't happen.
Well, you know, it's funny that you mentioned those Ladies of the Rose, as though we are maybe a little headstrong and sometimes proud. No, but we're talking about traditions, and you brought up, you know, the 4 peerages that are polling orders. Well, in Atlantia, obviously roses are not polling orders, but Your Majesty, Luned, you actually started a tradition in Atlantia, and you called your students companions, correct? You were the first rose. You were the first rose to have a companion as a student?
Yes, that's correct.
So what made you develop that role, and what brought that on?
Well, all the other peerages, and they all had students. You know, knights had squires, and laurels had apprentices, and pelicans had proteges. And roses really didn't have that, and it wasn't a tradition. And, you know, at the time, I wasn't, I was busy building our household. We were focusing on building a household and a camp, and I wasn't spending any time on a whole lot of kingdom level service or arts and sciences. I wasn't fighting. I did combat archery, but I didn't do heavy fighting. But as a former monarch, I thought that there were things that I had to teach people. And so I gave it some serious thought, and I talked to other roses, and of course I talked to Anton, and other peers. I just kind of tried to get a sense of, you know, how I would structure it, what it would be. And of course I had to come up with a name if I was going to do it, you know, and all the, you know, what I thought at the time were, man, proteges, and God, that's already taken. They're already, so trying to think what would be a student name, but it would also be more of a mentor, not just student teacher, but actually more of a closer relationship, I guess. And I came up with companions. I really don't know where I came up with it for. It just hit me. I came up with the name because at least the people that I had, they really were my companions. They, you know, they traveled everywhere with me, and I taught them about royal service and how to build households and camps. And to me, it's a valid area. I look today, we had a discussion about this, in fact, is that there were knights and peers who had no idea how to set a high table. None. They didn't know how to set up a court that would be you know, the full royal court, you know, the baronage precedences. How do you find that out? A great court. And so things like that. How do you be a liaison? How do you be a liaison between kingdoms? Some of the politics of royalty. All of those, I think, are valuable. And it's not really teaching somebody to be a queen. I can't teach you to be a monarch. You don't get that position that way. You earn that through a different combat arena. But what I can teach you is how to support those people. Being part of a royal retinue, helping with the royal household, all really valuable areas, and interacting with the autocrats and other kingdom autocrats to help your royals now. And we have some of that today, I think, with the, and they call us lots of things now, royal steward, chief companion, you know, chief, what do you call it? I lost it now. Memory goes. chief retainer. There you go. Head retainer or chief retainer. They have lots of different titles now. So you have one person doing that, but I think there are a lot of people who could benefit from that. And it ended up being it's service to the kingdom that they can build on if they're then interested in becoming a pelican.
I think one of the things that we were both raised with is an idea that we learned from Duke Michael. And Michael explained to me as a young king his philosophy of what peer qualities were. One of the definitions that he would look for in any of the peerages. And his idea was, he gives the example of himself. If I'm there, my son is sick, I have to leave sight, and there's a state dinner that's supposed to be going on, and my wife and I are off site with a sick child, I want to be able to turn to this peer and know that they can run the state dinner. No matter what royalty's coming, what visitors are coming, that they understand what is the protocol, how to host, and for everything to be able to function even though they're not there. Someone who can stand in and represent the kingdom. And I think that's the type of skills that Luned was looking to teach on top of other ones, but it's also skills that I think as peers, we all need to make sure that we're teaching, because that doesn't come natural to any of us. It's not easy for any of us, but they're learned and they can be learned. So.
Well, thank you for that. I think it's a really neat piece of Atlantean history that a lot of people don't know anything about. And so I wanted to include it here so we could sort of get a better feeling for traditions that may have been skipped over for several generations and are now sort of resurfacing again. This one is not a fun question. It's like the worst work interview question that you ever get, and I know everyone loves it. So, what is each of your biggest flaws and your greatest strength? In your own, for your own perception, of course.
My greatest weakness is that I'm not a super organized person. I'm a planner to like a certain extent. I like do baseline planning, and then I'm more a fly by the seat of your pants kind of person. So I could do better by being more organized, and that's throughout my whole life. Modernly, SEA. Luckily, I have this guy here to take care of that because he is the planner. And my greatest strength is I'm a very quick learner, and I'm extremely adaptable. So I am used to professionally and personally rolling with a lot of changes. So I can adapt on the fly fairly well. And I think that's a pretty good strength in the role of a monarch, because you're never really certain what's going to come at you out of left field, and you have to be able to roll with that and make sometimes lemonade out of lemons. And you hope it doesn't go the other way, but sometimes it does.
Well, for me, I have two flaws that I've never been able to overcome. One is spelling, and the other one's singing. There's absolutely no place on this planet for me. I don't play Scrabble, and I certainly don't sing. I'll kind of folk along with it, and I might change the words, but it's absolutely terrible. My Luned tells me that my strength is also my weakness, in all sincerity, is that I don't know when to give up on somebody. I believe in unlimited chances, and I think I've been rewarded with that many times by people turning or getting another chance and being successful. But you do get disappointed sometimes with it too. But can't help it. I believe it of work. I believe all people want to do well. They just need to be in the right environment for them to do it. And I know that's all squishy, squashy kind of stuff, but I really believe it. And it does get me in trouble a lot. So.
He's the emo one. He's the emo one, not me.
I'm not sure that I would ever have described him as emo, but we'll go with it.
I'm not sure I'm entirely comfortable with that either, but there we go.
Fair enough. So you sort of said this already, but I would like to hear from His Majesty what makes Her Majesty a good queen, and from Her Majesty what makes His Majesty a good king.
It's very simple. She believes in what she's doing. With Luned, you are not going to get a show. You're going to get her truth, what she believes in, what she's committed to, and you're going to get all of her heart for issues she believes in, and you're going to get all of her fury if you go down that side. She's not a person that does it by halves. She's fully committed on both sides.
Sorry.
I'm okay with it. I just hope everybody else is ready.
So I think, and what makes Anton a good king is that he cares. I think he already said it. He actually wants everybody to succeed, and he wants everybody to have a good time while they succeed. And whether it's helping an autocrat, whether he's king or not, I mean, he will pitch in. He'll to help someone. Do they need help fighting? Do they need help meeting someone who can help them do something else? And that's his networking skills, you know, I think. But it's really that he cares. He cares about people, and he does believe the best of people usually. And he wants them to succeed, and that's in the SCA too. He wants everybody to succeed and have a good time, and try to empower that. He's big on empowerment. I think it makes him a great king.
That's really good. I like that. Thank you for saying those things. It gives little gems into who you are individually, and it's always nice to hear couples say nice things about each other. So it's always fun to hear bad things sometimes too. I mean, let's be honest. All right, so this is I really love this question too. You both picked your own champions. So how did you go about doing that? What makes a champion for you? I know His Grace Michael tends to pick the same individuals every reign. When he did reign before, he kind of picked them, at least in the latter years. And I'm assuming that's his comfort level. You know, I think Kuin picks, His Grace Kuin picks people based off who he bested in Crown Tournament. Is there a method to your madness of your champion choosing, or?
So for us, we've had a tradition that's a little bit different than other people. We pick one champion. We have a position we call Monarchs champion. And that person is also going to be our regent and is our regent. So if something happens to us, they're not only the champion for rapier, not only the champion for archery, not only the champion for heavy, they're also the champion if the kingdom needs a regent. They're there, they've already accepted that role. So we have picked different people. I think each reign for that. I don't think we've ever doubled up, because it's a big responsibility. And this reign is Duke Ragnar. Now, Duke Ragnar was a squire of mine, and Lynette is the royal steward for us. So that household has committed a great deal of time for this reign, and we're very appreciative of it, and we understand that commitment that they've made. Now, it doesn't mean we don't value the other champions and other notables, but for us, there is a difference between that position of being there with us all the time, traveling, working, putting up tents, cleaning dishes, telling us that we've done wrong and we need to go fix something. That it is the the one job in the ring that has complete carte blanche to exercise the judgment that we may fail with at some point, and to help us and keep us. I mean, everybody has that right, and we want people to do it, but this person is empowered to do it. It's part of the job that we've asked them to do specifically. Now, you have a captain of the Queen's Guard, and the Queen's Guard is a traditional unit.
Right. So historically, this comes back to the cultural question that you asked. How is it different then and now? So in our previous reigns, there weren't different champions for the different weapon types. There wasn't rapier champions or siege champions or archery champions. That didn't exist. There was only a champion, the royal champion. And then the Queen had a guard, and the position that was chosen was the captain of the Queen's Guard. And usually, I looked at it of various reasons. Historically, in our previous reigns, I looked at up-and-coming fighters, basically who I thought were talented, who were caring, who were trustworthy, who I thought could do well in the role and advance, and show some of their talents.
Gilmere was your first one. Yeah, he was Squire Gilmere.
Duke Gilmere, yeah. Before he became a knight, he was my first one, and he won our crown tournament and actually became prince. So I did a great job of choosing that captain. But, so this time though, there was a little cultural difference, and so who I chose was Sir Eckard, who's the captain of my guard. And really, for me, and this is true for all the ranks, I wanted somebody I clicked with also. Somebody who I had a personal connection with, that I could trust to take care of me, to be there for me. If Anton is not available, that I could rely on. And I thought Eckard was great. He's a great choice, and I'm really looking forward to interacting with him once we get going with events again.
So I know his family, and there's a closeness there.
Right, there's a connection and trust and capability, all of those things.
Great answers. Thank you so much. So we are going to go out on I hope, a humorous note, but I guess it could not be humorous also. What is the most awkward situation you have ever been put in as Crown? And it could be together or individually, because we all know that we're not always together at the same time. So
it's not humorous. But the most awkward position I think any monarch, not just us, but everyone is ever put in, is when you have to make a decision between two people or three people. That position is, it looks like, well, that's all the power of the crown. That's the greatest part, is you get to decide these things. It's not. It's the hardest thing we do, because someone's going to be successful and someone's going to not be successful. And every crown I know, everyone I've ever dealt with, has agonized over those choices. And you just hope you make the best one that you can. You never have all the information that you need to have, but you do the best job you can, whether it's selecting a baron and baroness in a very, very close polling where you're reading all the comments and you're going like, well, they're basically the same number of people are supporting each side. What are the difference makers? And you have an interview with each couple, and you talk with them, or each individual, and you try to discern that kernel of magic that you just feel. None of us are comfortable doing that. That's hard, and you don't want to be wrong. You don't want to be wrong for the people, and you don't want to be wrong for the people who you don't select. It's agonizing.
It is. I agree with Anton on that. It's like in the modern world when you're interviewing people, you're not going to hire everybody, and some people you have to fire. And it's the same way in the SA. Those are really hard times, because you've got people who are giving their all, and you've got to make tough choices. And it's never fun and it's never comfortable to tell somebody, thanks, but I had to choose somebody else. I don't like letting people down if I can help it. I don't want to make them feel bad. But it's something that, as a monarch, you have to make choices. So,
I mean, Your Grace, you had to do it.
They're not always fun choices.
They are not. They're not. But I'm going to make us go out on a fun note, because His Grace Christoph just came around the corner and said that he wants to know what makes him so great before we end this meeting and this interview.
Well.
In what context is this greatness? You're great.
His Grace says it's up to their Majesties to decide what his greatness is.
Well, I would say that His Grace has two areas that leap to my mind immediately. His belief in himself is unparalleled to anybody I've ever known. His ability to believe in the best and the most positive results that are going to come out of his actions give him a power to go forward in a way that I only can be envious of.
I, of course, recognize His Grace's prodigious drinking skills. He is effective at that. Kinds of greatness. I think he would excel in brewing competitions.
I could not be more proud right now in this moment. Could not be. Well, Your Majesties, thank you so much for today. I really appreciate your time, and I hope maybe we can do more of these with other persons, other personas in the future. It might actually be something that the kingdom would like.
I think you should. I think you should reach out and get some of the folks who people don't know from the past, and some of the ones that are current today that are up and coming, and let's meet them all.
Absolutely.
And thank you, Your Grace, for setting this up.
Yeah, thank you so much. I really appreciate it.